Good afternoon. This is James Wright, a reporter for the Washington Informer newspaper. I have the pleasure of interviewing U.S. Representative Oye Owolewa. Mr. Owolewa, how you doing?
Good to see you. Glad to be here.
Yes, well, we have in the city in some very troubling times, according to folks at the White House. As you know, we are under federal occupation. Could you give me your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that question. For the past month or few weeks, we've had the president federalize our police, has put National Guard as well as other federal agents on our streets. You know, he's doing what he says for public safety, but we're seeing it as more of a political distraction, and we're seeing people all across the city rise up, film officers, and really show them that they're not welcome.
Well, wait a minute. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser appears to be working with the Trump administration on this, and there has been evidence that crime has gone down. As a matter of fact, there was a statistic that came out last week that said there was 12 straight days without a homicide. Doesn't that mean that that's a good thing?
Well, yes, we obviously don't want murders and violent crime, but we're also seeing other aspects and other consequences of this federal occupation. We're seeing businesses go down because of less tourism. We're seeing dining options decrease. And we're seeing young people and kids afraid of going to school because they're afraid of ICE picking up their parents or people going to classrooms to bother them. So although we do appreciate the drop in crime, we've had other ways of controlling our public safety, like getting our $1 billion back from Congress so we can actually hire more officers, or even put together programs to keep young people engaged and not on the street.
You know, one of the reasons the district voters have elected you to this position is because you are fighting for this thing called statehood.
Yeah.
What is statehood, and why does the district need statehood?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I've been in this role as U.S. Representative for about 4 or 5 years now. And when I first ran for representative and we're talking about D.C. statehood, the conversation kind of began and ended with voting representation in Congress, right? Which is very important. It allows us to have a say on national matters. But since then, we've seen our budget be slashed, we see our locally passed laws be overturned, and we're seeing even the Congress threaten our home rule, which allows us to vote for our mayor and our DC council. So right now, when we're seeing this occupation, we're using this as to spotlight what's going on in DC and to show that our only way to free ourselves from that federal oppression is by becoming the 51st state.
Well, isn't it true that D.C. residents pay federal income taxes but are not represented fully in the House of Representatives and have no representation in the Senate? And even though district residents pay full taxes and have the obligations of serving in the military,
absolutely,
we still do not have a voice in terms of the Supreme Court that is constituted. Don't you see that as a problem?
I mean, do you want my job? You did this better than I did. No, honestly, I think it's important to point all those things out. We not only pay taxes, we pay the most in taxes. And much of those senators and representatives that talk trash about us take our money to run their states. So we're called donor states, even though we're not a state. We serve in the military. We do everything that's asked upon us, but we get none of the privileges that our friends in Maryland, Virginia, Alabama, and beyond. And when I went to West Virginia and talked to people about statehood, we had conversations first about things that were similar. They care about their water quality. They care about getting employment opportunities. And here we have infrastructural issues, and we have the highest unemployment percentage because of Trump. So there's things we have in common, and if we were to become a state and have voting representatives, voting senators, we'll be able to pass legislation that supports people in areas that their senators aren't even supporting them.
Well, let's make it clear. What does it take for D.C. to become a state?
In order for D.C. to become a state, we need to pass the House, which our ward on the Hill, Congresswoman Norton, has done a couple of times. We'll need to pass the Senate, which we've never been this close to, but obviously we still have work to do. And also, the president has to sign off on it.
Wait a minute. Doesn't it require a constitutional amendment?
what we've seen in the past with other states, they have not needed a constitutional amendment. What they would need is to usually join another balancing state, whether it's free versus slave states or conservative versus liberal states. They come in pairs. And now with the past few years, people have brought up Puerto Rico and other locations that have their own journey to statehood and self-governance. But here in the nation's capital, we're the only place that forces our residents to pay federal income taxes without having a vote on where that money goes, how it's spent. And we are looking for the same thing that anybody and everybody else have.
Well, I have an idea. What about retrocession? We go back into Maryland.
See, remember I told you I want you to take my job? I'm taking it back. So the idea of retrocession is D.C. residents being absorbed back into Maryland. We gave away what's now Arlington, Alexandria back to Virginia. And the long story short is we don't want to be part of Maryland. Maryland doesn't want us. Politically, it doesn't work. Financially, it doesn't work. Culturally, it doesn't work. We want to stay Washingtonians, but we want the same rights as anybody else.
Well, let's just be honest with you, okay? The real reason that D.C. isn't a state is like Ted Kennedy said at one time. D.C. is too urban, too liberal, and too black.
Yes.
Is that true?
I think people are afraid of black leadership. I think we're seeing a culture where things like DEI is considered a bad thing. That talking about the truth about slavery is controversial. But as an elected official, as a black man, sometimes you gotta tell people to get over it. We're here to stay, and we run our city well. And if we weren't compromised or sabotaged by the federal government, we'll be able to own what's happening here without being interfered with. Right now we have a president who bankrupts casinos and is taking our money and complaining about what we can use that money for. We're spending $1 million a day on a National Guard cleaning our forest area, while we could spend a fraction of that money employing D.C. residents to do the same thing. Hell, we can even get high school seniors to volunteer to do some of these things. And we're seeing wasteful spending, we're seeing political gamesmanship, and we're seeing substandard outcomes in the district. And whether it's me, other elected officials, or even activists, we gotta come together, speak truth to power, and do something about this.
You have traveled, as you mentioned this, but you went to a place called Utah, very conservative. Talk about the kind of reception you got in Utah.
I'm so glad you brought up Utah. I think in February, Mike Lee, the Utah senator, introduced the Bowser Act, right, which would essentially take away our home rule and remove all of our elected officials, including me. So I figured if he wanted to act a fool in D.C., why go to Utah and talk to his constituents? We knocked on doors, we talked to elected officials, we talked to even the media down there. I wondered, why is your senator not paying attention to the things that you care about, is interfering with my election and my governance? And not only did we get a good reception, we also found out that Mike Lee himself found out about this trip. So in D.C., in Ward 8, we learned to pull up when somebody's giving us a hard time. And I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to do that. And I'm really appreciative of D.C. residents' faith in me to do something like that.
Well, that's nice, but there's a rumor that you're retiring from being our U.S. representative. Is that true, or is the kitchen too hot for you? Why are you stepping back?
Well, we announced our retirement recently. I've been able to enjoy 3 really good terms as representative, 5 for statehood, doing things in the community as well to improve the quality of life. And I was really excited to pass the baton to the next generation of leaders. Someone who's ready to take the mantle and move the conversation just a little bit forward. But me personally, I'm not going nowhere. I'm excited about the next journey, pursuing city council at large, just really trying to execute some of the things we've been able to do in our current role as representative, whether it's our public safety, whether it's reducing and eliminating student debt, whether it's rehiring the federal workers who are looking around right now and saying, what about us? They need someone who can champion them, and I'm excited to be that person.
Why would you want to be on the D.C. City Council? They get overridden by Congress. It's a lot of work. Yeah. The salary is okay. It's a part-time job. It's a salary.
Right.
Why would you want to do that? Why not just open up a consulting firm and make a whole lot of money?
Well, hey, when you're called to action, you step up. And I never thought I was going to be a politician. I'm not somebody who wants to be in office for 30, 40 years collecting a check. But at a certain point, living in Ward 8, being a pharmacist throughout the city, there's certain people that just haven't been looked after. There's been certain people that don't look at their elected officials and see themselves in that reflection. And when you're talking about opportunity to step up and show people the right way and get other people motivated themselves, see themselves as leaders, it's something that you can't just always say, it's something you got to do. And I also feel really passionate about some of the changes we've been able to make by ourselves. A couple of years ago, my house got shot into. And living in Ward 8, when I finally got home, the neighbors were inside, the cops were gone, it was business as usual. But it wasn't business as usual to me. And when I talked to the streets soon after, I found out that I had a couple of neighbors that party all day, party all night, and they were shot at. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. But I asked them, what keeps you guys outside? And they told me they couldn't get the job they wanted to get. They couldn't live where they wanted to live. They kind of lost hope because they had criminal records. And I asked them, if I'm able to find you a way to get your record removed, what would you do? They told me they would get the job they want. Mm-hmm. They told me they would move out of their parents' house. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't be on the block no more. So the light bulb went off, and I'm like, well, let me find you this program to help you on your way. Because I don't want you getting shot at, and I don't want my house getting shot at. Looked around, couldn't really find that program. So rather than complain about what a council member isn't doing, or complain about what the mayor isn't doing, we created it ourselves. We grabbed a couple of community leaders, we grabbed a couple of influencers in that community, some neighborhood folks who've been in those spaces, and I just wanted to create a program where they can see a lawyer for free, and maybe 10, 15 people show up, and I said, you know what, I did my job. The Washington Forum picked it up, talked about it, a couple of the people talked about it, 130 people signed up. We had to change locations, and 70, 80 people showed up. We had a great event, and then the people who didn't go called me up saying, how come you didn't remind me of it? What's your next one? So we kept doing it, and 2 years in, we have a program where people finally have that hope. And not only do people have that hope, we've been able to inspire legislation to change. We've been inspiring the expungement or the record sealing laws to be more generous for those who need that second chance. And we're seeing now that when people care, change happens. This is not because of me. This is because the returning citizens were sick of the laws. And they lobbied for themselves and made things happen. And when you're someone who can legislate, provide oversight, and have power over the budget, you can see real changes in the city. We can't talk about black displacement without talking about black displacement of money. How 10, 20% of business owners in DC are black. Well, if the money's leaving our communities, we can't expect our community to be able to stay and function. And I believe that we can have a fairer budget. I think we can have better outcomes. We can have young people have higher literacy rates, and more young people going to college to help reduce violence. I think that's a winning message, and I think people in DC deserve that.
We're getting ready to wrap up. Should you be lucky to win a spot on the city council, you would be probably the first full-time health professional on the city council. What difference would that make?
As a pharmacist, as a scientist, we think differently. We have the scientific method. We go with a question first to find the answer. We don't just find our favorite answer and work backwards. We are collaborative. We're team players. But we also have a different set of experiences that set us apart from the average person. Knowing that I'm an expert in medications and an expert in insurances, I know how to deliver better health outcomes while reducing costs. Living in Ward 8 and having a hospital here, I know what it takes for it to be in a better position. Losing pharmacies left and right, I know about how to change the insurance payout system, how to look into pharmacy benefit management to make sure that healthcare workers can make a living east of the river. Because when you have resources concentrated on one area, you're disincentivizing healthcare workers from being in another one. That's why there's 3 hospitals in a throwing distance in Ward 2, and we couldn't even have 2 hospitals at once in Ward 8, and none in Ward 7. You can't expect to have better health outcomes while using the same players. And I'm ready to be used by DC residents to get better outcomes.
Last question.
Yeah.
There's a good chance that as you decide to run for the council, you'll be running at some point against a DC native.
Sure.
You're not a native of DC. You're from Boston. Mm-hmm. Why should the voters here in DC elect some Bostonian to our city council?
Don't forget Nigerian American too, with a name that most people can't pronounce. There's a lie. It's not just Boston. The reason why is because when people vote for me, it's not me they're voting for. They're voting for a chance for themselves to be heard. They're voting for better outcomes for themselves. I won my first race in Ward 8, moved into the neighborhood less than a year before, because I brought a campaign that reflected what the people in the community wanted. I was knocking on those doors. They asked me, they told me they wanted speed bumps because they were afraid of the kids being outside and all these Maryland drivers speeding up and down 15th place. They didn't care if I was Nigerian American. They didn't care what my birthplace was. And we were able to deliver. Now we went from having weekly accidents to none. Right? And whether they can pronounce my name right or whether they've been to my parents' home country, they know when somebody delivers. So I went from being the divisive candidate to the one that they all called upon when I joined the ANC commission. And I'm proud of the work that I've done, and I'm proud of the people that took a chance on me because they haven't regretted it since. So I'm looking for DC residents, not only for your vote, but for your advice. I don't know everything. I'm not the candidate that's going to tell everybody I know everything. I need people to help me. I need people to help draft legislation and tell me their ideas. Tell me when I'm wrong. Y'all need you to tell me when I'm right. Tell me when I'm wrong, because that's how we get to this together. And right now, we have candidates who are afraid of being wrong. So they'd rather just talk to lobbyists. They'd rather go to those wine, fine dinners. I'd rather talk to people who've been through some things. Because that's how we create our exposure clinics. That's how we create our business seminars. That's how we created programs for young people. That's how we've been able to do science enrichment programs for the past 11 years. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. Born and raised in Boston, but I became a man in D.C.
Thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for joining us this afternoon. See you next time.